Yeah, okay.
Great. All right. Let me share my screen and we'll kick off. Okay, let me put that in full screen. I don't want that for you. Go back. Okay, thanks everyone for attending. So just to give you some background on why we've asked you to join this session. So recently, back in December, Ofgem mandated the programme to provide more granular information on defects, including defect aging and how central parties and programme resolver groups as well are working within the programme defined defect resolution SLAs, as are defined within the defect management plan. Now, the context of this mandate from Ofgem is around about Sprint 8. There was feedback going to the IPA, and in some cases felt that central party program progress more than they would expect. Sorry, Carolyn. Are you okay? Can you hear me?
I thought you broke up then and your screen disappeared. I don't know if it was just
Yeah,
me.
a couple of times.
You're okay. I think you're
Oh,
okay
really?
just
I
now,
might
though,
have a
Don.
bad. Yeah, I
I
might
think
have a bad
you're good right
connection.
now. Yeah, we can
Okay
hear
now.
and see you. Yeah,
Did you
okay
catch any of
now.
that?
We did. Yeah.
You did. Okay. So what we've done in response to this in the end of sprint reports is we're now providing more granular information on the defects, as you'll have seen in the post-sprint reports since January onwards. We are including the defect age in that reporting, but what we haven't been doing is any reporting against SLA and SLA adherence. And the reason for this is we did have a mechanism within ADO that we previously implemented, which I think was either a checkbox or a radio button that would show when central parties and the program team had actually accepted a defect. And then that would be how we would track how that resolution time looked like versus the SLAs. Now, unfortunately, this function that was implemented, it wasn't something that was being used very frequently. And then it was quite difficult to track back and for the defect management team to have visibility as to when that had occurred and be able to manually update that. So in response to this requirement from Ofgem, we've been looking at ways of resolving this. And the difficulty is in terms of confirming and factually reporting on when a defect has been accepted and then the time it takes to resolve it. It's quite a manual exercise to go through each defect and determine that based on the commentary and when the defect's moved around. So we've been looking at a low impact way to try and resolve that and be able to track it. And I think that there is some benefits case for doing this as well. So in terms of SLA adherence trend analysis, this can provide program management and Ofgem with visibility of where management intervention may be required. And also SLA data helps inform any risks associated with the testing. And we're particularly thinking about regression test here, where we're going to have a very short window to be able to resolve defects. So having some historical analysis on that would be helpful. So what we're implementing is a solution that will be impacting just yourselves as central parties and the program team as resolver groups. And that will allow us to then track the response and fix SLA times accurately in all cases. And what we're also doing as well as part of the request is we're going to, as a team, backdate that information. We're proposing up to Sprint 8. Once the functionality is implemented, we'll be able to do that quite easily. And that will give us a more broad view of how things are trending. As I say, it's a solution that's only going to impact this group. So central party resolvers and program team resolvers. Voluntary participants are out of scope because the defect management team update that, and also the SLA doesn't really apply to them anyway. And quite honestly, voluntary parties, they are requested to keep us informed of their defects, but we don't always know whether they've got a defect in the background or not. So the implementation approach for this is going to be, we'll hold this training session to talk you through it. Hopefully you'll see it's a minimal impact in terms of your in terms of your working process within the ADO lifecycle of a defect. And then we'll look to implement that change in ADO in the master from Monday. And then once we've got some data coming in, we will then start to report with that data in our end of sprint reports. So before I hand over to Caroline and I think KG, I'll just pause if there's any questions or queries around that. All right, I'll hand over to you then, Caroline, I think.
Okay, thank you. Let's take the screen.
Shall I stop sharing at this point, or do you want me to
Yeah,
go
I'm
to
just
the
going
next
to take
screen?
this screen. Yeah, that's okay. You can all
Yeah.
see. Yeah, okay. Can everyone see the screen here? We're back to ADO now on the defect template. So what I'm showing you here are that we have two new overall states that we've implemented. This doesn't affect at all the progress states that we already have, which are assigned, fix and progress, ready for retest, etc. They tell us where a defect is in terms of being fixed, and they remain as they were. So no change to those. What we've done is simply add two new states, overall states here. So this is how the defect template looks when you raise a defect. You'll all be familiar with that. Once you enter the details and select save, we then have the availability for the two new states. You can see there's one here for resolver group assigned and the other one for accepted by resolver. So the happy path scenario would be that the defect is raised and triaged, and we decide that it needs to go to resolver group A in the first instance. We believe that's who may need to fix the defect. We will then set this to resolver group assigned, and this is when your response SLA will begin. So let's say this is set to resolver assigned on its merry way to the resolver group. And when you guys receive this in your queue, you then have time to look to check if you have everything you need to do your investigation. If at any point you are sending it back to us, we know that defects move around from our internal teams to yourselves and back to the defect management team. And this is all part of normal investigation. So this is expected that they may move around. Very rarely do we send them to a resolver group and it's accepted straight away. That it is common for them to move. So we would set it to resolver group assigned, and this starts your SLA clock. When you have a look and decide it's all okay, if everything's okay, you accept the defect, you've got everything you need, you then simply select accepted by resolver. By accepting that box, and this is only a call to action for yourselves, by selecting that you accept the defect, your SLA response time stops and your fixed time begins. So that's the happy path scenario. So we assign it to you, your response time starts, you then accept it, and your response time ends and your fixed time begins. If it's not a happy path scenario and you send it back, or you send it to SI test assurance or SI design or back to defects, you simply set it to active. What that will do is stop all clocks. So by setting a defect back to active, it can stop your response time and it can also stop your fixed time. So effectively, that's a reset on those clocks. What ADO will do in the background is, let's say it was assigned to yourselves and you accepted it. So now you're in your fixing time. All the timestamps for when we select these states is recorded in ADO in the background. So it will only ever look at the very final assignation to a resolver. So if it does move around, all those clocks stop by selecting active. So for you guys, if we assign a defect to you and you send it back to us, ordinarily the defect team are clear in-house and we will reroute defects. We'll look at the comments you add. So none of that changes. We're still using it in that collaborative way. If you set it to active, you would add a comment and let us know why you're sending it back to us. So none of that changes. It's just that by selecting active, it takes it off your stack. And that will obviously be supported as well by a comment that you will add to the defect in the normal way that we do now. So the comments on the defect still remain as a factual narrative about what's happened, but we have the timestamps that we needed from ADO by selecting these two new states. So previously, the problem we had to mine that information was that we had to go into the defect comments and so we go into the history and we'd have to look at when it was sent back and forward, and that was a very time-consuming task for us to look at the very final assignation and also when that was accepted by the party that are making that fix. So now we have those dates and times recorded by selecting these two new states here. So, and it won't be uncommon for us to see that resolver groups are setting that back to active when they have a question for us, or they feel that there's a need for some reason to stop the clock, or for you think that it is not a defect or you reject it, for instance, just set it back to active. So when I look at defects that are in an active state, this is a call to action for our defect management team. I know that I need to look at that because it's came back to us and we need to discuss it again and we need to reroute it. So just as a summary again, for the defect management team, we will be selecting resolver group assigned, and that's normal when we have a triage of a defect to set it on its way. If it's not for your team and you want to send it back with comments, set it back to active. So when it's accepted by yourselves, your fixed time is running, okay, your fixed clock is running. What stops the fixed time is when this overall state is set to resolved. So if accepted by yourselves, you would save it and accept it. And then when the defect is fixed, we simply ask you to set it to resolved. That stops your fixed time clock. When the overall state is set to resolved, what happens on the details here, the defect, is that the actual release date and time is populated from this selection of the overall state as resolved. Now, this state of resolve can be set by yourselves or it can be set by SREJA, release and environments. If there is perhaps a margin between the time that your release goes in and whoever has selected this resolve box, just bear in mind also that we can overwrite any dates and times associated with when it was assigned to you and when it was accepted and when it was resolved. So those 3 date and time stamps that we hold in ADO, we can manipulate those if there are any challenges from yourselves or we need to unpick a particularly complex scenario. But ordinarily, we're hoping that by managing those 2 new states, that we'll see fairly and quite clearly when it was assigned to you guys and when you accepted it into your stack, and that's when your fixing time would start. So just going to pause there for any questions that anyone might have on setting it to accepted by resolver. And if you don't wish to do that and you wish to send it back, set it back to active, stops the clock, and that will be an alert to me to give that defect some attention. So I'm just looking at.
Yeah, a couple of questions. Anna's got a hand up.
Hi, yeah, just to say, the accepted by resolver. Now, the issue that we obviously have is that we get a lot of defects that aren't actually, we can't resolve. They're not actually our problems. We do a lot of investigation and then find out that it's working as expected or it's someone else's problem. So we do a lot of investigation on a lot of defects that aren't anything to do with us, understandably.
Yeah.
So the word resolver is a little misleading, or do we only accept as resolver when we're happy that it is actually our problem rather
I think that's
than
what we're
someone else's
saying, Anna.
problem?
Yeah. So accepted by resolver is we're certain that it's established as an MPRS defect on your part, and that's already been established. So as I say, we still have the defect notes and comments, so we still have a full history and view. When also on this state graph, we can see exactly what's happened. So we have all of this other information to support any changes in the state, and there will always be different permutations of what can happen. So it can go to you. You may hold on to that for a few days and do a lot of work, as you say, and come back with advice and guidance to us, Anna, and say that actually it's not a defect, but we can tell you what's happened and what advice we need to give back to the participant. So it's accepted by resolver. It will be when you're saying, yeah, okay, we've looked at it.
It is our problem.
It's our problem because that's when your fixed clock starts, and your fixed clock only starts when you have admission. It's our defect, and we're gonna look at it. And we're gonna give you a fixed ETA.
Right, okay. And also, if it comes from us and goes to someone else and comes back, for example, we have one at the moment where the one about profile class SSC, where we know there is an issue, but we're waiting for extra bits of information from others. So there will be a gap between, so we can say, yes, we're happy that this is a problem. We have a problem here, but we're not ready to fix it yet. our clock continues, or can we set that? Do we set that to active at that
You can
point?
set it to active, and if you, as I say, supporting comments on here will give us all a sense of why that happens. So in the ordinary way, whenever we change a state on a defect, ordinarily we add comments to support why that's happened. So there's always a narrative behind the selection of these different progress states and the overall state. If you set it back to active and add a comment, then it's clear why that's happened. So we
Okay,
can
that's
still
fine.
see, we can see in the history how everything's unfolded. And we need to be reasonable and understand that not everything's going to be straightforward. There will be times when you'd need to pause it because something's happening, but you've not read, you don't know whether it's a fix. You don't know whether you're starting on the fix for that actually, or whether it is in fact a fix that's on your stack. So by setting it to active and putting in a support comment there, we can see what's happened. What we're really interested in is the happy path scenarios where we know we've sent it across to you and you've got everything you need and we're just waiting on you saying, yeah, I accept that. But we
Okay.
do understand that active phase can stop the clock, and it can be used for those pause moments in between when other things are happening that perhaps outside your control.
Yes, and then also, and you say set it to resolved once we have done not
Once the
once we've
fix has gone in.
not once we've implemented the fix, but once we've decided on the fix, or once
Once the
we've
fix has gone in, Anna, because
once it's gone in. So that
once it's
could
gone
be
in.
quite a
Yeah.
while, couldn't it?
Yes, it could be.
As you
So
say.
that's
Right,
that's
okay.
why we're measuring the fixed time from when you say it is an MPRS defect. So from that time that you confirm that to the time that you actually put the fix in. So for instance, you've got some fixes going in your patch on Wednesday. So
So
the
we won't
measure would
set it to
be
resolved until Wednesday.
exactly, and that's when your fixed time stops. And by selection of resolved, then what that does is populate this box here that would automatically populate the date and time. That's all linked to when you select the
Right.
resolved
Okay.
state. So that
Okay.
nicely ties up there. We can also add in the date here, but the
Yes.
prescribed manner that we want you to follow is
No,
to
that's
select
fine.
resolved. And also just note as well, as I said, for any complex scenarios, or if there's any perhaps not it does move around from our internal teams to you and back to us again. We can override or manipulate any of those dates and times to take into
Yes.
consideration. If any mistakes were made, we didn't intend to select it or whatever, add a comment, let us know, and we can help you out with making sure that those dates and times are accurately recorded for the reporting, because all of this is to support the reports, right, which we'll show you in a second. So
Okay.
when Sajitha shows you the reports in a second, you'll be able to see which columns are populated by the assigning to resolver and accepted by resolver, but we can overwrite those dates and times. So it does allow for us to be able to get around that and help you if things have gone a little bit awry.
Okay, one other quick question. Obviously, some defects end up being having to be fixed by two separate people. For example, the test script needs updating plus an
Yes,
MPRS defect,
yes.
for example. So I assume as each person would then take it as theirs to accept by resolver
I,
and then set it back and then so it
I
would
think it would be
switch
done
between resolvers.
sequentially then. So we'll decide which portion is going to be done first. If it's a test case, that should be updated first before any functional fix is made. Or I think we'd need to make a judgment call
Yes.
if we have like a hybrid defect like that. I think then there will be scenarios that will arise where we'll need to think how do we approach this. But we'll do that in agreement with yourselves so that it's completely fair across
I
Okay.
think
your estate.
ideally, if we've decided we need to branch off two actions off a defect, we should really open another defect for the second action.
Yes.
We
Fine.
could do,
Good.
yeah. That would be a way
Mm.
to do it, so that we have them running in parallel with two different resolving teams, and we can
Yeah.
measure both of those separately. That might be a way that we want to do that. Yep.
Okay. Okay. Thank you. I'll let
Okay,
Louise
Anna.
say her bit now.
Hi, Louise.
Hi, yeah, I just had a couple of questions around the clock starting and stopping. So if we've had something assigned to us, but it turns out it's not a defect with us, and we give it to another group, does the resolution, or sorry, the response clock start again for the next group?
Yes, it does.
It
Yes, it does. So
That's
it's overwritten each time that state is selected. So that then facilitates for it coming back from you, going to another resolver, a fresh a fresh response time would start and a fresh fixed time would start each time. So it's only ever the last assignation or the last accepted by resolver date and timestamp that we'd use for those reports.
Okay, and then there's the follow-up with if the severity changes, does the clock change to
Absolutely,
start from
yeah.
that point as
It's
well?
all the calculation for what we would expect in terms of response and fix is all driven by whether it's what combination of priority and severity it is, because obviously they equate to different expectations in terms of time. Yeah.
Oh,
So
okay.
I think
I'll have another look, because I think on the collaboration base, the SLAs are on the severity at the moment, but if there's a
they
combination,
yeah. I've got
yeah.
I've got here, well, I can show you here, Louise. It is led by severity. It is led by
Right.
severity. So you can see here, this is what we're referring to. Can we all see that here? I've just taken this as in the DM plan. So you're right, it led by severity.
Okay.
So when the severity changes, that's when we'd expect different expectations against your fix and response then, when it's changed here. Maybe
Right.
changed from a 2 to a 3, and then we'd score it differently. And I think when we look at the reports in a second, you can see how we record that on the reports against whether it's 2, 3 or 4 or whatever. I think Sujitha can demonstrate that on the report we're just about to look at.
That's lovely. And yeah, just to ask a little bit more about the resolved, is that something we'd update, or is that something release update when we let them know? Because we send a little message out.
Yeah, so we have some central parties. For instance, Avanade like to set it to resolved sometimes, and sometimes yourselves you choose not to. But I think it could be a combination of you central parties setting it, or the release and environments manager. So whoever is the most appropriate person to do it. It works at the moment. At the moment, that seems to be doing okay when we set it to resolved. So it's as soon as that's deployed, that's when we check the resolve box. So that should be, we should all be, I think we're all aware of when a release goes in, because we present the RFC at triage. We're all aware of the day and time that goes in. So there will be somebody from our team that will be overseeing that deployment, and we'll make sure as soon as it's gone in, the first thing we do is set it to resolved, so that you get that accurately, and there's no lag in terms of this date being recorded here for you. So it should be as soon as, so that your fixed time stops. So you can do it and let us know, but we'll also know when your release is being deployed. You know, it's something that we'd know between us, so I don't see that should be a problem. There is something else on here, actually, just so I'm courtesy to let you guys know, it doesn't affect you, but we have also put another change in here. We have a management summary that we are now going to use typically at the end of sprint, so that we just put in here a summary of where the defect is and any actions or any highlights or anything of note that we would want to add to the management summary at the end of sprint. So we'd put some words in there in prep for the end of sprint, and this just enables us to extract this information and put it into a report. So that's something that I'll be doing for each defect, or our team would do for each defect as we get nearer the end of the sprint. So that's just to help us again with our reporting. No action is needed from your teams. That's just for our defect and test management to use. So you'll see that, but just to let you know, that's what the intention of that is. You don't need to do anything with that. That's just for our use. So it's just, as I see it, it's 2 new states, and just remembering that it's really important to select resolved for both of us to remember, select that as soon as your deployment's happened and that fix has been made.
Caroline,
And
I'm
then
just conscious of time.
Yeah, over to you, Dom. Yeah.
We have got a central party session afterwards. Do
Yeah,
we want to just
okay.
have a quick look at the potential reporting? Yeah, I'll share my screen
on there.
again.
You can take the screen back. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Caroline. So
I think I'll just go through it quickly, Sujitha, if you don't mind.
No problem.
So what we're proposing to do then is, in the end of sprint report, we'll have a separate section that just looks at SLA performance. We need to look at some of the data and how it comes out, but we think based on how we've set it up, it's going to look something like this in terms of SLA calculation. So as you can see, we'll have the timestamps that have been captured in the process. We've got the severity here, which obviously drives which level of SLA is appropriate for this defect. And then based on that clock, we've then got a column here that says response SLA met, yes, no. and if it was a no, how many days or how many hours over it was. And then with fixed SLA, it will be the same. So yes or no, whether it was met. We then propose to look at some sort of trend analysis as well. So in terms of how that might look, these are just mock-ups at the moment, and we do need to refine this, but we were quite keen to get the change in first, so that we could effectively capture the data. But we'd be looking at, are we in a situation where we're trending to an improvement, or are we having a problem in certain areas, and is there anything we need to do about that? So it'll be some sort of trend reporting in a graph format, which you'll see in the end of sprint report. But first of all, we want to get the change in, build up the data, and as I say, we've got the ability to backdate on that as well, because we have done some manual analysis going back to the beginning of sprint 8. And so we'll do that, and then we'll come back to you and we'll show you the reports that we're going to be publishing. Okay, I think that's bringing us close to 4 p.m. So I think we'll just pause there if there's any questions about that.
We're sending out the comms, aren't we, Dom? This pack will go
Yep.
out if it's not already gone out. So that's a nice summary of everything that we've covered here for everyone.
Yep, and we're looking to implement that on Monday, but we will confirm to you exactly when we're doing that before we do it, and then we'll put out comms out to say when it's been done. Okay, it goes off there then. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks.
Appreciate